Welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive designed specifically for you. Our mission today is unpacking a brief but incredibly dense set of notes from a piece titled The Surveillance Standoff, Security versus Privacy.
Right, and it's a fascinating piece.
It really is, because right now, the U.S. government is locked in this bitter standoff over the renewal of a major surveillance program. But here is the catch. The data they are arguing over isn't just foreign, it's yours.
Exactly. And while the source material we are looking at today is literally just a few bullet points, the implications hidden inside those points are massive.
Massive. The outcome of this specific debate could fundamentally alter how your own personal digital data is monitored going forward.
Yeah, and to really understand this standoff, we have to look at the tension between two fundamental concepts that pretty much define modern society: national security and personal privacy.
Right.
And I want to emphasize right at the top for you listening that this is a highly charged political issue. There are deeply passionate, entirely valid arguments on both sides of the aisle. So our goal today isn't to take a side. We aren't here to tell you what to think or, endorse a specific policy. Our goal is to just act as your guide.
We want to help you understand the core mechanics of the debate happening in the government right now, so you can clearly map out the terrain of this issue. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Because the first major factual nugget from our source material immediately threw me off. The text explicitly states that the program up for renewal is a foreign surveillance program.
Right.
So if it's a foreign surveillance program, how does it catch American data? I mean, it sounds like casting a giant net in the ocean, aiming for a specific type of fish, but accidentally scooping up everything else swimming nearby.
That's a great visual.
Thanks. But, if the program is specifically designated as foreign, why are we talking about Americans at all?
Well, what's fascinating here is the cause-and-effect relationship built into the very architecture of modern communication. You bring up the fishing net analogy, which is a great starting point for understanding the unintended consequences of surveillance.
Yeah, because it's messy.
It is. In the fishing industry, when they drop a massive net for tuna and pull up sea turtles instead, they call it bycatch.
Bycatch.
Right. And our source material points out that while this is a foreign program, its renewal dictates how Americans' data is monitored, because monitoring foreign entities inevitably intersects with domestic data.
Inevitably intersects.
Yeah, but to really grasp why this happens, we had to move past the ocean metaphor and look at the actual mechanics of digital infrastructure.
Okay, so we aren't just talking about a clumsy net. We are talking about how the internet is fundamentally wired.
Precisely. The logic here is that data doesn't travel in straight geographical lines. The internet utilizes something called packet switching.
Packet switching.
Yeah. So when you send an email or a message, your data gets broken down into these tiny packets.
Like breaking a letter into a bunch of puzzle pieces.
Exactly. And those packets don't just fly through the air directly to the recipient. They get routed through a massive global web of servers, fiber optic cables, and data centers.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the routers dictate the path of these packets based on efficiency, not geography.
I want to stop you right there because I think this is where people get lost.
Sure.
If an American sends an email to another American, let's say, from Chicago to Denver, why would that ever cross paths with a foreign surveillance target?
Because the United States hosts a massive percentage of the world's digital infrastructure.
Oh, right.
Yeah, the servers powering global communication are heavily concentrated here. If a foreign target, let's say someone in Europe, is communicating with someone in Asia, the most efficient route for those data packets might be through a server farm in Virginia.
Wow. So the foreign data is constantly passing through our domestic backyard.
That it is, constantly. Yeah. And the surveillance apparatus is often sitting on that very infrastructure to monitor those foreign threats.
Because that's where the data is.
Exactly. But the intersection gets even more direct. What happens when a foreign target specifically emails an American?
Right.
Or texts an American?
Right.
Or visits an American website?
Then the American's data is actively in the conversation. It's not just a packet passing through the same server, it's a direct interaction.
And that is the crux of the issue. If the government is monitoring the communications of a foreign entity to gather intelligence, they are logically going to sweep up the data of anyone that entity interacts with.
Even if that person is sitting in Ohio.
Even if they are in Ohio. The label on the legislation says foreign, but the technological reality means the impact is very much domestic.
Okay, that makes the fishing net analogy feel a bit too simplistic.
It does, yeah.
It's less like casting a net in the ocean and more like managing a massive global postal sorting facility.
I like that.
Right. Foreign and domestic mail are all dumped onto the exact same conveyor belts. You can't open a bin to look for a specific foreign package without also seeing the names, addresses, and return labels on all the domestic envelopes sitting right next to it.
That is a much more accurate way to visualize it.
Mm.
And in that postal facility, the workers are trying to find the dangerous packages without violating the privacy of the everyday mail.
Which sounds impossible.
Well, because everything is mixed together at lightning speed, separation becomes a massive logistical and technological hurdle.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Because that realization that American data is inextricably mixed in with this foreign surveillance, that leads us directly to the resulting political fallout.
It really does.
Our source material notes that U.S. lawmakers are deeply split over this, to the point of a legislative standoff.
A total gridlock.
Yeah. But why does this have to be an either situation? Are lawmakers treating this as a zero-sum game where more security automatically means less privacy?
Essentially, yes.
But wait, we have incredible AI and filtering technology now. Why can't we just write a line of code into the surveillance program that says, hey, if the IP address or phone number belongs to an American, immediately delete the data?
Right, just automate it out.
Yeah, why are lawmakers acting like this is an unsolvable binary?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we can see why a simple technical filter doesn't solve the standoff. It actually exacerbates it.
Wait, really? How does filtering make it worse?
Let's look at the technical hurdle you just proposed. Writing a line of code to filter out American data.
Yeah.
To automatically delete an American's email, the system first has to scan that email, analyze the metadata, and determine the citizenship of the sender or receiver.
Oh. Which means the government still has to open the envelope, so to speak, to check the return address.
You've hit the nail on the head. For the lawmakers on one side of this split, the ones fiercely guarding the constitutional privacy of American citizens' data, the very act of the machine scanning that domestic envelope is a constitutional violation.
Even if a human never sees it.
Exactly. Their primary concern is that the government shouldn't be allowed to casually sweep up, search, or even mechanically scan the private communications of its own people without a specific warrant.
Because searching to delete is still searching.
Right. For them, every piece of domestic data caught in that foreign net, even if it's eventually filtered out, is an infringement on civil liberties.
I see the paradox there. To prove you aren't looking at domestic data, you have to look at the domestic data.
And that is a massive sticking point for privacy advocates. But now look at the other side of the split identified in our source material. The lawmakers fiercely guarding national security.
Right, the other side of the coin.
Their primary concern is identifying and stopping legitimate threats to the country before they happen. For them, this foreign surveillance program is a crucial, non-negotiable tool.
And I imagine they look at the idea of filtering out American data as a massive security risk.
They do, because threat actors aren't foolish.
Right.
If a foreign terrorist knows that any communication involving an American IP address is automatically deleted or ignored by U.S. surveillance, what do you think their next move is?
They start routing all their communications through American servers.
Exactly.
Or using American proxies. They use our own privacy filters as a shield.
The security advocates argue that if you put too many restrictions on the system, if you force the system to aggressively drop anything that looks domestic, you create a blind spot.
A huge blind spot.
Yeah. You might accidentally let a massive threat slip through because the system incorrectly flagged a foreign threat as a domestic interaction.
Or because a foreign threat was deliberately trying to recruit or coordinate with an American inside the country.
Exactly that.
That makes the standoff make much more sense. It's not a petty disagreement over procedure.
No, not at all.
It is a fundamental collision of two core governmental duties. I mean, the government has an absolute duty to protect the physical safety of its citizens, which requires a robust, unblinking security apparatus.
Right.
But it simultaneously has an absolute duty to protect the constitutional rights of its citizens, which requires strict privacy and strict limits on that exact same apparatus.
And when a single program sits right on the fault line between those two duties, the lawmakers crack apart.
Yeah, I can see why.
If you maximize security, if you cast the widest possible net and keep all the data to ensure you catch every single threat, you are mathematically going to capture and hold more domestic data. That sacrifices privacy.
But if you maximize privacy, if you restrict the system so tightly that no American data could ever possibly be caught or scanned, you blind your security apparatus to a foreign threat that happens to be interacting with the US.
It is the ultimate legislative gridlock.
Mm.
Both sides are entirely justified in what they are trying to protect.
Which is what makes it so difficult.
Right, you can't just split the difference when you're dealing with absolute principles like physical safety and civil liberty. A compromise often just means you get a system that is mediocre at both.
A system that still violates some privacy while still missing some threats.
Exactly.
That is a deeply uncomfortable reality, which brings us to the ultimate question posed by our source material. So what does this all mean?
Yeah.
We've talked about the mechanical realities of our global postal sorting facility. We've talked about the lawmakers battling it out over constitutional philosophies in Washington. But this isn't just a theoretical exercise.
No, it's highly practical.
The text explicitly points out that the result of this standoff could change how your data is monitored.
This raises an important question, perhaps the most vital question of the modern digital age. Where do you, personally, draw the boundary?
It forces you to look in the mirror. We all want both things, ideally.
Yeah.
You want to feel perfectly safe from global threats, and you want your texts, emails, and browsing history to remain perfectly private.
Of course.
But the source material forces us to acknowledge that demanding 100% of both is a technological and logical impossibility.
It requires an honest assessment of trade-offs. Think about what absolute privacy looks like in a digital world.
Okay.
If you demand that your data is never, ever swept up, scanned, or held in any kind of government monitoring system, you are demanding a system that is opaque.
Completely dark.
Yeah, and an opaque system provides incredible cover for bad actors. Absolute privacy inherently creates vulnerabilities in national security.
It creates dark corners in that global sorting facility where threats can hide, knowing the government isn't legally allowed to turn on the flashlight.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. But then flip it around and examine the alternative. Think about what absolute security looks like.
Okay, absolute security.
To guarantee absolute security against any foreign threat, to ensure no attack ever slips through digital communications, the government would need to see everything.
Everything.
They would need a net that captures every single drop of water, or a postal facility that opens every single envelope just to be sure. Absolute security inherently requires sacrificing personal data privacy.
You essentially have to agree to live in a glass house.
Exactly.
And the source material highlights that this is a debate over a renewal, which tells me this isn't a one-time fight.
The fact that it's a renewal is crucial. It means this debate is cyclical. Technology is not static.
Hey, it's always changing.
The way data is routed today is different from a decade ago, and it will be vastly different a decade from now.
Think about all the new tech.
Yeah, the use of end-to-end encryption, the rise of decentralized networks, the sheer volume of global data. I mean, these factors are constantly altering the landscape.
So every time the program expires, lawmakers have to look at the new technological reality and try to find that impossible balance point all over again.
Which is why understanding the underlying mechanics, the why and how of the surveillance, not just the what, is so critical for everyone.
Definitely.
If you only focus on the surface level politics, you miss the structural realities driving the conflict.
Let's take a step back and recap the battlefield we've mapped out today.
Good idea.
The U.S. government is currently locked in a major high-stakes debate over whether to renew a massive foreign surveillance program.
And because of the inherently borderless architecture of the internet, where data packets mingle in global servers and foreign targets communicate directly with domestic citizens, that foreign program inevitably sweeps up Americans' domestic data as well.
Which has caused a massive legislative standoff. Lawmakers are deeply divided, acting as the guardians of two conflicting ideals: protecting the constitutional privacy of citizens from government overreach versus protecting the national security of the country from foreign threats.
The outcome of this standoff hinges entirely on how that balance is struck.
Yeah.
And whatever compromise or hardline stance they arrive at will directly dictate the parameters of how your personal data is intercepted, filtered, or monitored going forward.
Before we wrap up, I want to reiterate our core mission today. We've talked a lot about the friction, the technological hurdles, and the split between lawmakers, but our objective here was simply to lay out the facts provided in our source notes impartially.
Okay.
The goal wasn't to declare a winner in the debate, but to ensure that you are well informed on the actual mechanical stakes regarding your own digital footprint.
Knowledge really is the most valuable tool you have in an era of constant information overload.
It really is.
By understanding the structural trade-offs, why the net catches what it catches, you can engage with these privacy and security issues critically rather than just emotionally. And to that end, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that builds on the foundations we've discussed today.
Let's hear it.
If the underlying architecture of global communication means that foreign surveillance almost always captures some domestic data, will there ever be a time when a true technological line can be drawn between the two? Or is the very idea of strictly foreign surveillance in a completely borderless digital world an illusion we are just pretending to maintain?
Wow, that entirely reframes the conversation. It makes you wonder if the laws we are writing are trying to govern a version of the internet that simply doesn't exist anymore.
It forces you to question the very definitions of the words we use in our legislation.
It really does. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the boundaries of the world around you, keep looking closely at the invisible infrastructure powering your digital life, and we will catch you next time.